But comparing the type of elections in the UK and that of Ghana, I'm sure you've monitored the elections in Ghana before. What are the major differences, and if there are any similarities, can you let us know?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in many ways, we don't pretend that our voting method is that advanced. It's not electronic, it's by hand, it's all counted by hand. That's part of the tradition, that's part of what people love about election night in the UK. Everyone stays up all night, and different constituencies have a race to announce the result first, but the results are 650 constituencies, so it takes all night for all the elections to come. But in terms of, I guess the thing that's most in common between the UK and Ghana, perhaps not surprisingly given our shared history, is the constituency basis of the vote. And in fact, if you think that Ghana has, 27 million people, and about, 275 MPs, well, the UK has about 63 million people and 650 MPs. So it's the same sort of ratio. It's about 1 MP per 100,000 people in the population. And the similarity with Ghana is that the constituency basis, and we have a system which we call first past the post, like in horse racing. So whoever gets the most votes in each constituency wins. They don't need to get 50%, they just need to get the highest number of votes. The biggest difference is that we do not directly elect our head of government, the Prime Minister. So in Ghana, a Ghanaian voter would go into the polling booth and have effectively two, or at least two, but two main choices. One for president, and they'd vote MP. And then it's the leader of the largest party, as the result of that, who then has the right to form a government and can become Prime Minister. But what that means is that in the UK, the two people with the greatest likelihood, only people in the whole country who directly vote for them are the people in their own constituency. So that's the main difference.
Okay. And then also it brings in the question of the person who is going to be the Prime Minister. The debate has been back and forth, and I think clearly we've also seen close to about 3 or 4 women in contention for the Prime Minister position. Apart from Margaret Thatcher in the history of the UK, have you had any women actively leading political positions?
She's the only female Prime Minister we've had so far. There are quite a number of women in the next generation who are possible future leaders of the parties, and that remains to be seen. But I don't doubt that, and I hope that I will live to see further British women Prime Ministers in the future. But today, effectively, it's about two people. But the main feature of this election is based on the polls, and I don't have any information other than the polls like everybody else, but most people expect what we call a hung parliament, which means that no party has an absolute majority on its own, and therefore you're into the territory of coalitions, which is in fact what we've had for the last 5 years. We've had a coalition between two of the parties. And
from your initial submission, you said that the Prime Minister is determined by the total number of votes that his party, by extension the various constituencies, the number that is highest depending on the party, that person becomes the Prime Minister.
Or to be accurate, the number of seats.
The number of seats that party
because
wins.
There's not, and because it isn't a proportional system, there's not an exact correlation between the total number of votes in the whole country and the total number of seats. This is something the smaller parties complain about, because they tend to have a smaller percentage of seats than their percentage of the votes. So there's always a bit of a debate about the electoral system itself. But yes, generally speaking, it's the leader of the party with the largest number of seats who has the first opportunity to try and form a government. Okay.
Now, we have also read in sections of the media and closely monitoring activities in the UK, we're told that there seemed to have been the participation, the enthusiasm that normally characterizes elections seem to have been slightly lower this time around. Is that your reading of the game as well? And what do you think is accounting for that?
Not necessarily. I think, in fact, you could argue the opposite way. When everyone expects the result to be very tight and very close, that can encourage more voting, because individuals think that their vote is worth more than normal. Last time, in 2010, we had a turnout of 65%, so 2/3. Personally, I would hope it may even be a bit higher this time. It's difficult. It depends on many factors, but last September, when we had a referendum in Scotland about the future of Scotland, whether to become an independent country or to remain part of the UK, the turnout was 86%, which is extraordinarily high. So when people do get enthusiastic about politics, it can go up. Personally, I hope it's above the level it was a few years ago. And of course, you hear cynical comments. I don't think that's unique to the UK, and our election campaign is actually quite short. The official campaign is only about 5 weeks, but of course some people get fed up of wall-to-wall politics all day and all night, and are just relieved that election day is finally here.
And from a bit of research we've done, we are told that since 1922, we've just had two of the parties that you mentioned, that's the Conservatives and then the Labour, always be the front runners, always produced prime ministers in the last, since 1922. What do you think is accounting for this? And is there the hope that the smaller parties could also be able to make some impact, probably take over the reins of government sometime?
Well, it's what we've had in the UK is traditionally a two-party system, or mostly a two-party system. And that compares to many of our fellow countries in Europe, which are much more used to having a coalition. So what we've just had for the last 5 years, a coalition government, in this case between the Conservatives and Liberals, is quite new in our history. It appears, if you believe the polls, though the only poll that matters is what happens today, but if you believe the opinion polls, we may be back in the territory of a coalition government again after this. So maybe this is the new normal, it's the new politics. So the smaller parties are beginning to have a bigger role and a bigger say. But politics is supposed to be a living organism, and it's supposed to change and evolve over time rather than always be the same. But perhaps the lesson is that coalition government is now going to be much more common in the future than it has been in the past.
And taking off from where you left off, if you have a coalition government, help us understand the dynamics of it. How is the system going to be run?
Well, I guess it depends a lot on the mathematics. I mean, tomorrow we'll know how many parties have got how many seats. In theory, the magic number you need to get to is 326 seats, because that's a majority of one amongst 650. Actually, you can probably have a few less seats than that, and effectively form a majority. So really the first thing tomorrow, when you know the results, is just to look at the maths and see which combinations of parties who are willing to cooperate with each other can add up to that number. There are alternatives, unless we have what most people would regard as a surprise, and we do have a majority for one single party. But otherwise, there are other combinations. There are combinations, for example, something called a minority government, where a government that doesn't have a majority rules on its own, but on a vote by vote basis, agreeing with other parties on particular policies. So it's quite complicated. And the last time we had a sort of similar situation, which was 1974, when the result was quite unclear in this way, we ended up having another election just 6 months later. So we could speculate endlessly, and of course, to a certain extent, it's pointless, because in 24 hours we'll know the results. But there are a lot of different combinations out there
that amount to that. Okay, before we go to my next question, we're told that we have Nanaba Anamoa on the line. She's in the UK. Good morning to you, Nanaba.
Good morning to you, Martin.
Great. What can you tell us about the mood in the UK this morning?
Well, it's very bright and very chilly here in the UK. Of course, the people of UK already used to this kind of weather. But of course, most of the voters here have one thing on their mind. They know that by 10 p.m. the polls will close, and so they would have to cast their vote. And they're being reminded that it only takes 3 minutes. So if you have the right to vote, you must go and vote. And I must say that the polling station for this particular election are not too tough. Remember that in 2010 elections, about 1,200 people in this country who were qualified to vote were not able to vote because at 10 p.m. the polls closed, and even though they were in queue, they were not allowed to vote. But in 2013, that law was changed, and so the EC says that if you are in the queue at 10 p.m., no matter how winding it is, you can still cast your vote at 10 p.m.
I see. And tell us, okay, well, that basically covers also the polling system, but is there a general enthusiasm about people wanting to come out to vote?
I think so. I've been to about 5 polling stations already in the Westminster area. I've actually left there about 30 minutes ago. I came to Covington. I've been to 3 polling stations, and people are very excited about the election. You realize that a lot of them want to go to work and then probably at lunchtime go and cast their vote. So it's unlike Ghana, where everything comes to a standstill on election day. People go in queue at 12 a.m., 1 a.m. Here, the system is faster, and you are sure that the rest of the time you turn up, you will be able to vote. So yes, people are coming out to vote, and I must tell you that per the statistics here, there are about 5.5 million people voting today in several polling stations. Statistics say that over 40,000 polling stations across the country.
Right, and from your initial interactions with some of these people, are you picking up any signals that we are likely to have a clear majority?
That is highly unlikely, because if you have been paying attention to the opinion polls, it's suggested that no one party is likely to win a clear majority. And I'll take you through some of the polling, opinion polls that have come out. There are suggestions that it is not likely that the Conservatives or David Cameron would get the right numbers to stay at number 10. So definitely, if he wins, then he's been, positive to win the election, but he will not get the right numbers to be an outright winner of this election. So definitely there will be a hung parliament like we saw in 2010, and so there will be a coalition. Who is going to join him in that coalition is what we are all waiting to see. Will it be the SNP? Remember, Scotland have come up very strong in this election. Exactly. They lost the referendum. The election has been about a number of things, including defence. Trident has come up, and Trident is in Scotland. So it is very important for the people of Scotland as well. And then there's the Liberal Democrats. Of course, they are seen as the third biggest party in this country. So with the coalition involved still the Liberal Democrats or the SNP, that is what we're all waiting to see.
And my final question to you this morning is, what do you think the voters are looking out for? What is the central message that they are all seem to be looking out for in the candidates? Okay. And is it going to influence any decision?
I've spoken to a variety of people. A lot of the black people in this country are concerned about immigration. So for them, immigration tops the list. Now, when you speak to people born in this country, the actual Brits, and not those who have to acquire citizenship, they are looking at the economy. But on top of their list is Europe. Do they want to be part of the European Union? It's also very important to them. So 3 things I've picked up: the economy, immigration, and then being part of the European Union.
I see. I would have to leave it here for now, Nana, but if you have any additions, we'd want you to make it. Otherwise, then we'll come back to you at midday, where we are very sure that by then you would have gathered enough information.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, Nana Namwa, TV3's reporter, who is giving us a live update of happenings in the United Kingdom. They are voting today, the 7th of May. It's a Thursday, and as Nanaba said, it's a cold morning there, which probably is a usual. But we still have John Benjamin, His Excellency John Benjamin, in studio to help us understand some of the things that people who are UK citizens based in Ghana, what they can do if they want to vote, and what processes they need to go through. So coming back to you, sir. You, I'm sure, have voted.
I voted by proxy, which means that I nominated a friend of mine who lives in the same constituency. There's a formal process. You fill in a form, and so I voted via someone else. The other alternative, if you live abroad, is to vote by post.
Okay.
But you can never 100% rely on the post arriving in time. So I decided to go for a proxy vote.
Okay. And what are the plans in place for UK citizens here in Ghana who want to vote?
The same. They can either register to vote, which is very easy. I registered online myself a few weeks ago. It took about 5 minutes. So you can either ask for a postal vote, or you can nominate someone to vote for you. What we don't have, unlike some other countries, we don't have voting in our high commissions, in our embassies abroad, because it would be too complicated, because it's a constituency system. If we had British people who live in Accra, for example, coming in to vote at the High Commission, which constituency would their votes go to? We don't have, unlike, say, France, we don't have a Member of Parliament who represents people overseas.
International community.
So that would be too difficult in logistical terms to do. So, but there are ways of voting, and hundreds of thousands of British people abroad do vote that way.
Okay, now let's look at the probable outcome of the elections and its impact out of the UK. We know that the United Kingdom is a very powerful, I mean, you are part of the G8, the G20, and then you are very instrumental in international politics and other countries, the way you relate to them. How or what kind of impact is today's election, the outcome, going to have on Ghana and Africa specifically?
Well, I think, as Nana Abba was implying in her report, that foreign policy issues haven't formed a huge part of this campaign. There is a part of the debate, as there always is, about the UK's relationship with the European Union. As regards, say, African issues, and Ghana specifically, the major parties agree on that we should continue with our economic assistance programme. We've already reached the UN target of 0.7% of GDP going in overseas aid, and very few countries have done that, and the major parties are pledged to continue that into the future. And I think that relations between Britain and Ghana will continue regardless of who's in power in the UK, or indeed in Ghana. And sometimes the two governments in Britain and Ghana are aligned in terms of their political sympathy domestically, sometimes not, and it doesn't have a great effect, because in both countries you respect the will of the people and the government that is produced on the day by the election. And
I mean, clearly the UK is a major power player when it comes to Europe. Why is it a debate whether you should be part of the European Union?
It's a debate. It's a more complex debate than that. It's a debate about the type of relationship. It's a debate about the political project within Europe itself, about political integration as well as economic integration, and a debate about the powers that rest with the Parliament in London vis-à-vis the powers that are given over to the Parliament in Brussels, and the ability of Brussels to make laws that apply throughout Europe. So it's quite a complex debate. But personally, I'm a little surprised to find that during the last 5 weeks of the campaign, in a way, it wasn't a bigger issue. It didn't. Most of the debate has been about the economy. I should add, by the way, because several people have asked me here in Ghana, including a government minister who asked me the other day if I would be out of a job next week if the government changed. That contrary to many countries, every single one of our ambassadors, of our High Commissioners in the whole world, without exception, we're civil servants, we're career diplomats, we're apolitical. Okay. So that means that, in my case, just like any citizen, I have the right to vote in secret, but I'm not allowed to say what my political preference is. I'm not allowed to campaign for a party, let alone be a candidate. Okay. And the person who asked me the other day said, but surely you were appointed High Commissioner to Ghana under a conservative government. But before I came to Ghana, I was the British ambassador in Chile, and I was appointed ambassador in Chile under the last Labour government. So we have a very strong ethos amongst civil servants and diplomats that we are publicly completely apolitical. So much so that I've been a career diplomat for 30 years. I have very good friends who I joined with all those years ago, back in the 1980s, who I know well. I know them socially. I know about their families. Because of this ethos we have about not revealing our personal preferences, there are many of them I wouldn't like to say for sure, even though I've known them for 30 years. I'm not quite sure who they would be voting for today.
Okay, I think I would want to leave it here. We'll be wrapping it up and keep a close eye on the developments in the United Kingdom. And as I've said, Nanaba is there, so if you stay with our bulletins, she will be coming through with various reports and how things are turning out in the UK. Your final words before you leave?
Well, I might be commenting a little during the day, although in an uncontroversial way. You can follow me on Twitter. That's at
John Benjamin.
No, at John Benjamin 19. No H. No H in John. Okay. A lot of people look for me and they don't find me because they put an H, but it's at John Benjamin 19. Actually, you know, if you're really interested, you need to stay up all night and watch the coverage on the international broadcasters. But the results won't be clear until maybe 4, 5, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And then you may have the result clear in terms of the number of seats, but you may not be clear about who is then going to form the government. Okay. Last time that took a few days to sort itself out, and that could easily happen again.
Yes. Okay, we'll have to leave it here for now. Thank you very much. You've been watching TV3's coverage of the UK elections. We've just started. We are gathering momentum up until when the final results are declared. I've been speaking with John Benjamin. He is the United Kingdom's High Commissioner to Ghana, His Excellency John Benjamin. And to follow him on Twitter, it is at JONBenjamin19. And I'm sure he will also be giving updates on Twitter. My name is Martin Esedudati. Thank you very much for watching.